Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Marketing Water Cooler Podcast. My name is Jeremy Francesi. Thanks for stopping by. Today, we're joined by Prabhjot Singh, currently founder and president and CEO of Pyze, and extensive background in technology, marketing, sales, and with a couple exits and a couple successes. So with the state of marketing and communications at where it is today, we're going to dive into a variety of different things. So welcome, whether you're on audio or video. Thanks for stopping by. Prabhjot, why don't we start here and kind of help cover the basis for those that maybe aren't as familiar with you, your background. It's very extensive to the intro, quite impressive, right? And I'd love to help people get up to speed on a little bit of your background and kind of what your focus is today, and then I'll kind of guide us from there.
Right on. Well, Jeremy, thanks for having me on today. I'm excited for this conversation and appreciate your listeners taking the time to peek in on what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
So I've been in enterprise software for the last 20 plus years. I started my career a big company out of school. I joined Citigroup, which is about as big of a company as you can work at, right, in many ways. And I had the opportunity to join their leadership development program, right? So this global management associate program where they rotated you different parts of the bank, gave you a ton of training on leadership, on banking, on technology, right? And you came out on the management track at the end of it. So I did that for about a year. And then I was recruited by this startup that just raised their Series A financing, right? And when I went in for the interview, literally 12 people in the company, right? So went from Citigroup to this company, Wiley Technology, where I joined as employee number 14. Right? I think they'd closed maybe just a couple of deals, right, by the time that I joined, and that was an amazing ride, right? We went from almost no revenue to about 60 million in revenue, got acquired by Computer Associates, and then I ran marketing at CA for the division that acquired us, helping grow that business several times over, right, over the next 3 years, because you can do that when you've got 5,000 salespeople selling software, right? It's all about the distribution channel. So I had that experience, and then then I've gone out. I've had the chance to start a couple of nonprofits along the way that have also scaled, and the Sikh Coalition, which is one of the nonprofits that I helped found, has got several $1 million sort of budget today with couple dozen employees, right? And I've started a social enterprise along the way. So got to kind of dabble in a few different areas, and then my current venture, Pyze, is really focused on helping enterprises achieve operational excellence, right? We work with some of the largest companies and organizations in the world, helping them improve key operational processes, right? And that could be originating a loan for a bank, or it could be maintenance operations for the Air Force.
Love it. Makes a lot of sense. And look, the conversation of digital transformation is really topical right now, whether it's SaaS or workflow as a service, workflow as a solution. There's a massive transition from manual process to digital workflows to RPA, machine learning, but there's that big step in between where if you're a file cabinet going to AI, there's a step in between, right? And there's a marketplace of solutions, and it's really interesting. So I'm looking forward to diving into that. Also, I wanted to say, for those that are in audio, I really like that quarter zip. I think it's a lot. It's clean. Right. It's fresh.
Cool. Yeah, it's not Nike Dry Fit.
It looks good. I like it. It looks good. So hey, let's dive in. Right, you touched on one thing that I think is really important, and for those listening and tuning in, there's a couple common things that we've been really forward about when it comes to the state of marketing, and we're finding that in the conversation of technology, a lot of the I don't want to say debate, but the conversation on, when do you acquire technology resources? How does strategy come into play? And ultimately, it's kind of that the chicken or the egg theory of we need the tools to be productive, but we also need to have a process in place so we know what to automate and streamline. And so it can be a bit tricky. And so what I want to start at, you touched on, was going into an organization that was at their Series A, not necessarily pre-revenue, but really early on in those days. Going from really, we'll say, $0 to $60 million means that at that point in time, you went from likely having some or a little understanding of the actual distribution channels, demos, target audiences, really who was your buyer, to having a really good understanding of who that buyer was, so you can go to market, position it, acquire customers, retain them, and then grow from there. And a lot of companies right now are actively raising money or recently raised money, and they're at that point now where they took on the money, they took on the investment, and now the investors are saying, go. Right. And so I'd love to understand from someone who's been in that position, right? And what happens typically after those first 30, 60, 90 days when you take on the investment? It's time to get up and go, right? In Series A in particular, where you're really trying to prove there's a market above all else. What typically goes on from a sales, marketing, and a process standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you, and the answer a little bit, is it depends, right? Because depending on the type of business you're running, right, you're going to kind of create your proof points to identify there's a market in different ways. Like in the Wiley case, we actually created a new market. We created a market that didn't exist, right? So if you rewind 20 years, early days of the internet, you'd go on, let's say, a bank's website and try to pay a bill or fill out a credit card application, and the site would just go kaput, right? Or you tried rent a car and the site would just die on you. And that's because in the back end, you had these monolithic Java applications, .NET applications running, that they would crash and no one knew why, right? There was sort of this blame game of, you had 50 people getting on a call in these large enterprises and saying, oh, it's the database, no, it's the application, no, it's the application server, blah, 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 right? And these issues go on for 24 hours, 48 hours, right? And no one knew why the application just went kaput, right? So what Wiley did was, we figured out how to be able to peek inside these applications and look at the bits and bytes of Java code or .NET code, right, that was running, to say, oh, it's this servlet or EJB, right, component within the application that's causing the issue, or it's a database connection or memory leak, whatever it is, right? And this was new, right? So for us, we really had to kind of do a lot of work in terms of educating the market that this is important. We work with the analyst community, right? People like Gartner and Forrester, to sort of say that this is something that you should care about and your customers should care about, because they have all these pain points. A lot of these applications were being deployed on Java application servers, right? So there were two companies, BEA and IBM at that time, that had leading solutions. So we spent a ton of time developing partnerships and educating their field teams on, look, like when an application goes down, people are going to not want to buy more of your stuff, right? It's common sense. So call us in, we'll solve the problem for you, so you can keep selling them more stuff, right? More application servers and more more software, whatever it is. So we did a ton of work around education and a ton of work around channel development. So there was a point where we would get calls from IBM saying, hey, we got this fire at this account. Can you send in a person to go firefight it, right? And we'd go in with our software stack and send in a really smart consultant, and they would figure out exactly what the issue was. We'd solve the problem, and we resolved and remediated the issue for the customer. We unblocked the partner, and talk about a compelling event to get a deal closed, right? So that kind of model worked really, really well for Wiley. And we spent time developing those channels. So we developed like a partner response center for each of our main partners, right? SAP and BA and IBM. So anytime anyone in the field had an issue, they could just pick up the phone and, sort of like a best in class partner response, right? Where we'd help them solve the problem.
Love it. Makes sense, right? It's interesting because we always explain we're an education forward firm. I think in the world of technology, the world of it's to understand what business you're really in, and in a lot of B2B, you're in the subject matter expertise. Well, you're in the human capital business, subject matter expertise, whatever you sell to the world.
Sure.
Right. You need great people, or you don't even have a chance to walk in the door. You need to have an understanding of knowing something unique or uniquely valued. Right. And then the question is, can you implement it, or are you providing the information? But that sounds like, it's a great example of, and we'll talk with organizations that their product it's not easy to understand to somebody that maybe isn't a technologist or isn't an engineer. And when it comes to sales, marketing, distribution in particular, going into an SAP, going to a channel partner that maybe speaks your language, maybe a little easier, but to a buyer that maybe doesn't understand exactly how to compartmentalize or how to position you mentally of, this is the type of solution, I've evaluated it before, therefore it's like this, there's a reference point. How did you guys go about that education process? Because it's, the days of a white paper and a case study and you're good, or it's over, right? And I know the time and place, obviously it was a few years ago, but the state of education is different because information is now readily available. So the question is, what are they getting, and is it right relative to, are they getting anything? I'd love some insight, Prabhjot, on how you guys went about educating the market. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on Wiley, that specific venture, but how do we use education and marketing when the product may be complicated in its own right?
Yeah, look, the job of any marketeer is to distill things, right, so that a fifth grader can understand it, right? Like if you can't do that, then you don't understand it well enough to be able to market it, right? And if we sort of fast forward to Pyze, right, what we're doing today, because I think that context will be a lot more relevant, just because the world's changed a lot, right, since the Wiley days. There's just so much more information and so much more noise today that you've got to be able to sort of cut through all this information to get your point to pop, right, or to resonate with people. And look, we explain what we do as a business essentially in 4 words: process efficiency, task productivity, right? So we help organizations improve their business, right? So if I go in and talk to a bank, I don't talk about the bits and bytes of what we do, or machine learning, or AI capabilities of our platform. It's really about what's your business, right? If your business is originating loans and processing loans, we're like, the question I always ask in like every sales conversation is, where do you have pain points today, right? And if they know their pain points and they know exactly what they are and how to solve them, and they've got a plan around it, well, then they don't need us, right? But almost no one ever does, right? Like people have a sense of how work gets done within their organization, especially when you're talking about a very complex transaction like processing a claim, for instance, or opening a bank account, or doing maintenance on an aircraft engine or part, right? So really, we focus on providing visibility to how work gets done. And from a marketing perspective, what we're doing is putting out bite-sized messages on different parts of that journey, right? How do you identify that you have an issue? How do you right? How do you know that you're going to have an issue
Mm-hmm.
a week from now or a month from now? And once you know you have an issue, what do you do about it, right? So there's these different parts of the journey that customers take with us, from kind of initial engagement to continuous monitoring, where they're continuously iterating on the business outcomes, right? Improving their process, looking at anomalies that are occurring and then addressing those. And there's no endpoint in terms of that engagement. So
Right.
I think what we want to be able to do is help people visualize how they get to a state of process efficiency and task productivity. So
Yeah.
their workflows are efficient and their people are unblocked and can do the work they need to do.
Do you find that the majority? So we actually I enjoy this because we work with some organizations in similar space. It's an interesting space, especially with more geographically distributed teams, virtual workforces, when a lot of collaboration is done in email and spreadsheets, disparate locations. It's a point where if you're a stakeholder or functional owner, you kind of have no idea what's actually happening in your business if you're trying to make strong decisions, let alone data integrity to drive good decision support. At the functional user level, obviously a different story where they're just trying to find a way to be productive, but it's like, inefficient processes is like rowing upstream,
Sure.
like you have
Yeah,
the right
yeah.
mentality. You're just,
Right.
it's not, it's everything's working against you. And so what I'd love to understand is, in your experience in this, as somebody that has been involved in bringing products to market, whether it's been Series A through or other ventures you've built, do you find that they're aware that they have a problem at a point where they can solve it? Like you talked a lot about educating them. Really, in essence, the way I heard it was make them a more sophisticated buyer, so they're aware of the market, aware of the category, aware of what's actually wrong, so they can kind of develop an approach to solving it. That way they align with you and they're like, oh, we have the same philosophy. Let's bring them in. And that way we can go to work to fix this. But where are they in the state of being aware they even have a problem? Because people have problems all day, right? I think it was Josh Braun. He puts out content all the time about, from a sales standpoint, people make progress without intervention all the time. It's like having a burner out on your stove. I got 3 other ones. I don't need a new stove yet. But then at some point, the second one goes, or the chef changes out and they're like, what is this? This thing's broken. I'm not doing this, right? There's a change. There's a trigger event that requires you to say, we need to solve this problem, right? How's your experience been on that when it comes to their level of awareness on like going to get answers? Are they immediately like, we need to put this fire out today? Are they really far up and we don't have budget? We haven't outlined the actual requirements, but this is frustrating as all hell. We got to start to figure out what's happening in this business, because it's like going to a doctor. My stomach hurts, my head hurts. Tell me what's wrong with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, look, I think the answer to that question depends on where you are on kind of that crossing the chasm curve, right? Like, are you talking to early adopters, or are you talking to sort of the early majority or the late majority, right? So depending on where your product is in its maturity, in its life cycle, you're going to be talking to different people, right? And in the beginning, you want to talk to people who understand that they have a problem, because you're not going to be successful in convincing someone who thinks they have all the answers that you're going to give them better answers, right? That's just right. So you've got to kind of go and talk to people who are going to be okay with some rough edges, even, right, in the product, that are going to help them solve a problem that they know that they have. And as you go kind of broader in the market, your product's going to be more mature, it's going to be easier to use, and you're going to be, and now you can sort of start to put out the air cover that you need to engage with sort of wider audiences in terms of, hey, people like you who are in this sort of a situation can gain these benefits, right? And then, you can kind of verticalize that story, and there's a lot of approaches that you have to kind of take to be able to resonate with different audiences, whether it's by persona or by role or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that happens after you've proven initial success, right? And then hopefully you've got the resources to be able to do that, right? Because you can't boil the ocean. You've got to start somewhere.
Makes perfect sense. So talk to us a little bit about where you're at in the life cycle with the current venture in that stage. I think that's a good segue from you're spot on, right? Don't battle upstream. Go tackle the market where they're in market, aware of a problem, aware of the category. It's just a matter if they buy from you or not, but they're aware of the situation, prove success, develop a great customer success model, and then use those insights to go capture the rest of the market while you ultimately generate the demand. If you do it right, you're able to get ahead of it, education forward. By the time they're ready to make a decision, they're already coming home to you. Where are you guys at today in the venture? Because I'm sure that COVID has been a catalyst for quite an acceleration in the digital transformation side of the technology movement, if you want to call it that.
For sure. Yeah. And not just digital transformation, but people have had to rethink their business processes, right?
Yep.
As the world's gone remote, I'd say almost every organization has had to reinvent some part of itself. Yep. And re-architect the workflows to support their core business processes. So it's been very busy for us over the last couple of years. And
mostly federal sector, federal, commercial. You spoke to military, government agencies. Can you, just so I have concept, we do we've talked a little bit on the show because we do have organizations being located in DC that do a lot with the government agencies. Federal is the different side of, or the commercial sector. Just help us understand so we can narrow in on it.
Yeah, I mean, we focus on process improvement of complex workflows, right? So that automatically kind of puts us in financial services, manufacturing, healthcare, right? Yeah. So like those are probably the top three verticals where we're engaged.
Highly regulated industries, really. Where, compliance is a non-negotiable. Regulatory environment's a bit strict, tight.
Yeah, and like we just recently won a large contract with the Air Force to help improve maintenance processes of aircraft, and nice. Even use that data to help predict which aircraft should fly what mission, right? Like using our AI engine. So it's like it's pretty cool stuff that we're doing. That's really cool. But as we kind of go back to maybe your initial question, for us, the addressable market is very, very large, right? So like if you think about being able to help a organization improve its core business process, that can really apply to any business. And totally. Whether it's a sales flow process, customer care process, right? That these things are common across all industries. And then you've got things that are specific to each vertical, right? Whether it's insurance or manufacturing or logistics or banking. So where we are right now in our life cycle is really focusing on scaling in these three verticals that I highlighted: healthcare, BFSI, and manufacturing. We've seen a strong uptick in demand in logistics over the last 9 months or so, just because we know that supply chain all over the world is constrained.
Of course. Well, in the States, there's two big players, and then there's everybody else, right? So depending on your go-to-market, how you capture the logistics side of things, I mean, you can go small, get really great customer success, and then work your way to the JB Hunts of the world. No, but there's only so many players that really own the majority of that market. So if you can go solve it, there's significant upside to.
Yeah, and it has direct impact downstream for most organizations, right? So like if we think about supply chain, like it's relevant in almost any industry, right? So if I'm manufacturing, part of my manufacturing process could be hampered by my upstream supply chain, right? Yeah. Where if I don't have parts available, I can't deliver the on an order. Similarly, we're seeing even in F&B or consumer goods, the supply chain is really, really important, and getting more so these days. So yes, that's an area that we're learning more about as a team and developing more expertise. But it's been really fun to kind of engage there and help customers.
Well, and To tie things back a little bit to the marketing side, I think when you're in, I don't know how you guys position yourself as whether it's workflow as a solution, workflow as a service, or low code automation, and that's really the packaging of it. But I think what we've started to realize more and more on the comms front, and just seeing how people position themselves, is it's a difference between the way we always explain it when we're looking at the framework of digital transformation is, if you think like, most people, if you're listening, you have a smartphone of some sort. It's like there's businesses that will deliver an application and it's the best friggin' application in that respective marketplace. Then there's the update you roll out on the phone that enables the phone to perform at its best, at its optimal potential, right? And from a digital transformation side, I think it's like, do you go to market as the best application or method to do that one tool? But if that tool is not in use, then it sits, on the phone, it's not being utilized, or in the business for that matter? Or is it the way that task or that function is performed? And it's not about we need a tool, it's we need a new way of doing this, right? It's like if you got a 9-year-old son and they hit that growth spurt and they go from being 4'11" to 6 foot, they don't need, a different shirt. They need a new wardrobe, right?
Sure.
I find it to be quite similar in the business side, where there's that's where the marketing and the purchasing mindset shifts between the early adopters to the secondary phase of the early ones understand we don't need a new widget. We need a new way to do this thing. And the current tools are not going to just expand with us because we're now at a different state in the business. The question is, how do we solve it? Right. I'd love to better understand from your perspective. I think one of the challenges in this market, especially on the marketing front, is being able to effectively position the solution relative to the human intervention and the judgment required. Because, and please tell me if based on the market you're in, there could be a misunderstanding on my end. But to my knowledge, you're still in an environment like many solutions where a human still has to participate in the process for it to be effective as a process. Right? It's not fully automated. Is that a fair assessment, or am I off there?
Yeah, and look, like we're far away from a time when robots will run the world, right? Or processes will be totally automated. Like what we're doing is really augmenting humans so that they can make the best decisions possible. Yep. And and identifying opportunities for automation that can help humans be more effective, right? That's the world that we sort of live in today, and we're helping accelerate the execution of a particular process or improve the business outcomes of a process by identifying the friction points or the gaps. And the way we approach this from a selling perspective is really meeting people where they are, right? So oftentimes where our customers are is they've got this legacy system, right? They want to do this transformation. They've got a sense of what they want to do.
Yep.
But how do you do it, right? Where do you start? Do you take what you have and move it to the cloud, right? Kind of a classical lift and shift, and then figure out how you improve it. Now, the problem is you might have a really crappy process, right? That if you lift and shift it, well, now you've got a crappy process in the cloud. Or you might have a process that's on-prem that doesn't even translate really well to the cloud. So what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll help do an assessment of the current state of the world, right? Where do you have issues today? Where do you have bottlenecks? So that as you sort of think about cloud transformation, you can actually remediate those issues in the version 1, right?
Right.
And by doing that, you get just so much greater ROI on that investment. And then once you're in the cloud, we're enabling continuous improvement, right? Because we've got our AI engine that's looking at process execution, so that we can sort of see, okay, hey, here's an anomaly that we noticed in your upstream supply chain that's going to impact you. We've noticed that this location is performing much better than other locations. So what can we learn in terms of best practices and then cross-pollinate them? You just hired 100 new people and they're all struggling with this one thing because that your senior people have figured out, right? So these are things that our system will monitor in near real time, flag to the business owners, the process owners, the product owners on the application side, so that they can take actions very quickly. right? Versus like the problem occurs and now you got to deal with it, right? So there's there's two aspects to the sales motion, right? The first is we come in and we can quickly demonstrate value and provide a blueprint that can help with that journey. And by doing that, we've effectively done the bigger sale, right? Because we can sort of show that, okay, if we did this as a one-time exercise, what if you could get this 24/7 on this side?
100%. That it makes a lot of sense. And to your point on a large market, I think I read a report that's like, if you have 6 or more people on your team, then you have 6 or more processes that are, there's something crazy to the point where you read.
Yeah, at least that many.
Right. At least that many. Right. Makes a lot of sense. And I, one thing I found this is no different than marketing and sales and every, component, every department. Most of the time, organizations are making incremental changes to patch things, right? And not from a software standpoint, but just from hey, this thing isn't working well. All right, well, can we just put something else in place for now? Can we put something in place? Well, why don't we get rid of this? And then you end up with this structure that has all these little random things that kind of make it work, but it doesn't really work super well. It's not scalable. It's not sustainable. And when you do want to make real fundamental change, it's very difficult because there's so many things involved. So it makes a lot of sense where you guys get involved and figure out, what are we working with here, right?
Yeah.
Where are we starting from? Where are we going?
Yeah, let's start with doing, health check, right? And so my friend Habib over at Tech Mahindra, which is one of our global partners, right? He says, like, you guys help us do an MRI of that process, right? So we know exactly where the problem is, and now we can operate on it, right? Because oftentimes, people will pick the wrong automation solution, for instance, because they don't fully understand the problem.
Yep.
Right? It's like taking out the wrong kidney, right, in the patient, because if you're not doing an MRI, you might actually have that problem. And we've seen that where someone selected RPA as the solution when it wasn't the right fit, right? Or they needed another way to tackle that problem. And if they have that visibility into the root cause of that issue, it's not just important to know what the issue is, you've got to understand root cause so that you can remediate it. Otherwise, you're going to make some missteps along the way.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I'm curious on a couple things before we start to tie things up here. You joined Willie, what was it, like late 2000s? I think it was like 07, 08, right? Somewhere around that time.
Wiley was 2001.
Wiley was 2001. Okay, so in the last 20 years or so, the how do we word this? I think there's more people at the decision-making level. Like, there's more people involved in most decisions. They're using more information to fuel those decisions, right? And from that standpoint, most of their time is spent not meeting with vendors, not meeting with people, getting information and immobilizing the case for change internally. So I'm very curious from your point of view, Prabhjot, how is your approach to, the early adopters? We kind of touched on, they're aware of the category, aware of the problem, looking for a solution. But the rest of the market, how's your approach to capturing that part of the market evolved over the last 20 years when you think about bringing those other technologies to market, distribution to partners and channels, now to a point where it's a different process to that extent. The way people buy things has changed. I'd love to understand your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent point. It's harder to sell today, right? Enterprise software than it was 20 years ago, for sure, because there's more people involved. There's more noise, right? There's a bunch of reasons why it's harder, and you can mitigate that by having better partnerships, right? And for us, we partner with 2 types of entities and organizations, right? So we're focused on process improvement, right? And oftentimes in the digital transformation context, and sometimes it's just a plain old vanilla process improvement opportunity, right? So there's these global system integrators that work with large enterprises, right? I mentioned Tech Mahindra, Ritu said, there's a bunch of these large Coforge organizations that we work with that have strategic relationships in place that are helping organizations just run their day-to-day business and plan for the future. So they've got the ears of the decision makers, because they're doing 7-8 figure transactions with these large companies on an annual basis. And if they sort of say you should look at Pyze because it's the right solution for your problem, people will listen, right? Versus someone from our SDR
recommendation, team. Not a solicitation, essentially.
Yeah, it's a recommendation from a trusted advisor, right? That's critical. And then the other part to our partnership strategy is the platforms, right? So oftentimes, as these digital transformation projects progress, people go from these legacy systems to more modern systems, right? So they're deploying and building these applications on like a Pega or an app system.
Salesforce, Appian.
Yeah, Mendex, right? Like one of these kind of modern platforms. So we've got partnerships in place with all of these low-code platforms that, again, customers that have a need to do process improvement, they're going to ask the vendors on which they're orchestrating these processes, right, or building these applications. So we've got kind of deep integrations and partnerships that make it really, really easy to deploy our software. And we call it low-code process intelligence, right? Because when you're running Pyze against a Pega or an OutSystems or one of these platforms, you don't have to do any work. It's like literally just drag and drop our component into the platform, and we'll automatically become aware of the process, right? The stages and the steps, and cool. It's like magic, right? But we've done a ton of work, both kind of on the business development and product side to make these kind of partnerships work. And now, right, if I'm targeting, let's say, a large bank, which it might be almost impossible to get a meeting with the decision maker, if they're hearing about us from the platform, they're hearing about us from their SI partner, we're reaching out to them directly, you can at least get a chance to go at bat, right, and pitch what you're doing.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I want to close it out with a question. I think you guys have raised a little bit of money in the sense of what I'd love to understand, and really for the audience, for the community, is knowing that the state of the actually, can you timestamp it for me? When did you guys raise that round?
We raised it about 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay. Yeah. So market's changed a little bit, but it's still recent enough from a standpoint of understanding what an investor is looking for in a technology play, proven track record. So obviously there's unique value there. But what are investors looking for right now when they're looking to invest in a technology company, a software company, somebody in the digital transformation space, or just technology at large? What are those things that really make it truly a unique investment for them that you find to be that sticking point?
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends on, again, stage of the company, right? So at early stage, it's really, I think the team is probably paramount above all else, right? And the market that you're tackling, right? Sort of what's your unique value proposition for this market, and how are you going to become a market leader, right? And that's typically more of a thesis, right, than having evidence and proof points to sort of demonstrate that you can do it, right? And then the hard work starts, right? The hard work starts after you raise the round, because now you've got to go and prove that thesis out and demonstrate kind of, hey, what are the proof points, right? Like we and for us, like we've got at least a few 7-figure deals that we'll do this year, right? Based on kind of things that we've done. And the way we see our business sort of shaping out is, like, there's sort of an initial deal, and then there's a second deal, and then there's sort of an enterprise deal, right? So it typically takes sort of 3 years to really go enterprise wide, where you can demonstrate the value of the solution. Because like you said before, if you've got an organization with 6 people, they've got 6 processes. Well, imagine how many processes an organization with 50,000 people has, right? Or 16,000 people or 10,000 people, right? Which are these large organizations that we're working with. So it's sort of landing and helping with a particular process, typically as a start. And then, we start to kind of expand the footprint and show how we can do it for 5 different processes, and then kind of, then go from there.
Makes perfect sense. I think it's really interesting. And it's the thing is, it's I find this type of stuff very interesting because it's something where it's so valued and necessary, but it's like, how do you, outside of early adopters who are very aware of the problem, very aware of the category in an optimal scenario. But then you start to look at it, it's almost mobilizing the case for change. That's the hardest part. You're going to have a couple key stakeholders that are like, we need to do. There's people that are hired every day, and especially healthcare, where they're hired specifically we need you to help us get technology enabled because we are so outdated, it's crazy. And that's literally why they're installed in the business, right?
For sure.
But the question is, how do you mobilize the case for change internally? Because dang, you can have the simplest policy rolled out to a company, and it takes a year for people to really buy into it. And so when you're working at the enterprise level, whether it's Fortune 1000, Fortune 500, these are multi-year transformations when they really go from start to finish. And you not only the average what's the average VP, I think, is in place for 19 months. The average VP of sales, I think it's 19 months. Average CMO is around the same tenure. So we're in an environment, and obviously you're not directly interfacing with that part of the house. I don't know the average tenure for CTOs or chief information security or the other side of the technology stack, but you start to look at the conversation of these types of agreements take time to really fully implement. And when you look at the staying power of that executive team, it's a very funny mismatch of what's the likelihood they're going to be there statistically for the full ride relative to what it takes to really modernize an organization so that they can take on the next chapter of the business and position themselves effectively. So I find it to be a very interesting opportunity, but great product. You also need to be able to connect with the people effectively, and build buy-in internally. And so I'm curious on, and just to close it out, so to speak, on once you get the key stakeholders, right? How's that process been of mobilizing change internally where they see a path to success? Because 2 people can't get that done in a large company like that.
Oh, for sure. Well, look, once you get in, the product's gotta sell itself in many ways, right? I'm a big believer in kind of product-led expansion.
Yeah.
Right. And in our context, yeah, sure. Like, look, from a sales strategy, blocking and tackling perspective, right? You can't just be talking to one person, because like whoever they are, they might be gone tomorrow, right? So that part of it is an account management piece, right? That you've got to have in place no matter what, regardless of what you're selling. And then for us specifically, it's really opening up the product to demonstrate value to different stakeholders, right? We've got people who the first thing that they do when they wake up in the morning and turn on their laptop is they look at Pyze to sort of see how did my process do yesterday versus the day over, like how many orders did we ship, and what was the performance of those versus the week before or the month before, or if I made a change, what impact did that change have on the overall end-to-end process. And that kind of stickiness is really what fuels our expansion and growth of accounts, right? Regardless of sort of who's there or not there, right? On a day-to-day basis,
right?
And then identifying other areas where we can add value, right? That are adjacent, and a lot of that happens through word of mouth. But we've got, like, I was just looking at a report just I think yesterday or the day before, where we had someone log into our product 70 times in 1 week, right? Like, it's like to look at different aspects of sort of the process, and they weren't just looking at a dashboard, right? Actually running visualizations of sort of process flows, identifying where bottlenecks are. So if we can get that kind of usage from all our customers, right, then
game over.
That's all we need.
Right, exactly. Makes perfect sense. And to your point, if somebody in customer service finds success, then somebody in fulfillment might say, "Hey, what's up with Danielle? What's up with John?" And then it drives itself. But you have to have evidence of success. So it makes perfect sense. I appreciate the insight and jumping in and joining us. And we'd love to understand, what's kind of on tap looking ahead, and kind of give you a second to kind of promote in a good way where they can find you, but also any events, anything happening in 2022 that's top of mind. You mentioned there's some big things you guys are pulling down, which congrats. We always love to hear people growing. But I'll give you a minute to kind of close things out for us and see what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeremy, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to come chat today. This has been great. Certainly, if any of your listeners are in the market for process improvement, or just want to learn about process improvement for key business functions, right? If you're, whether you're in sales, whether you're looking at kind of your marketing funnel, or the steps that are required to sort of see how an MQL becomes an SQL to sales getting closed, we can help with visualizing that entire operations journey. And oftentimes the value that Pyze provides is being able to look at a specific process across disparate systems, right? So from a lead in to a sale getting closed, and being able to kind of look at that end-to-end journey and identifying where there's bottlenecks, and providing you intelligence on opportunities to automate manual things that the workforce is doing today, identifying friction points, identifying where things get stuck. Right. So would love to have a conversation about that, regardless of kind of what sector you're in. Look us up at pyze.com. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I think, Jeremy, if you can drop the links.
Totally. In the we'll make things available in the show notes and everything. But
that'd be great.
Good. Everybody, thanks for stopping in. You know the deal. We'll be back for more very soon. So everybody take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.